Hello and welcome back to another Tachiai News Update. I've assembled the crew here. Andy Martin, creator of the site. Say hello, Andy.
Howdy.
Josh Kahn, our man in foreign lands, who is currently not in foreign lands. And I'm Bruce, of course, and there's no excuse for that. We're here to talk about probably one of the most ugly moments in sumo in my entire history of watching sumo. On day 13, which was late in March, during the Sandanme bouts, a Rikishi named Hibikiryu took a fall. I think it wasn't a kotanagi, Skyuinagi, I think is what it was. And he just went limp. And is so frequently the case in sumo matches, they let him lay there. And, you know, we've seen this behavior before, and we always talked about with fear and trepidation, just wait until the moment that it's a serious injury. Well, guess what? It appears it was a serious injury. The fellow couldn't move from any part of his body, and he laid there for an excruciatingly long time. And when they finally decided to try and carry him out, they did so in a way that was probably, if he had a neck injury, probably compounded it or made it very bad. Readers of the site know that we are fairly fanatical about the lack of sports medicine in sumo competition. I think I've said my piece now. I'm not going to go to Andy first because he's written about it, and I'm sure we're going to get a full download on that. Josh, your thoughts about what happened on day 13?
Sometimes I think that it's beyond the association at this point. We've all posted a lot of commentary and our thoughts about, you know, what the Sumo Association can do to deal with the injury problem more effectively and integrating sports medicine, as you say, Bruce. But the Sumo Association is steeped in history and traditions and will always be loath to change. And I think what's disappointing for me is the role of the media is to report and to critique and to analyze. And I don't see enough of that, you know, even from within the Japanese sports media. And I'm not saying they didn't do a post or do an article covering it, but, you know, it's not their want to come out and tell the situation for what it is, which is a shocking abuse of Rikishi by the association by not providing adequate instant medical care and assistance at tournaments. And if they don't do that, then it's harder for them, the folks within the association, to make a change, because when the association is buttressed, you know, for lack of a better way of putting it, by those traditions, by history, by this is how I came up, this is the way that we do things, you need those voices. And the Sumo Association has, as we've seen, you know, many different committees which are made up of civilians who advise them on what they should do. You know, they need those voices, and those voices need to be loud. And I think maybe if this was a top division guy landing on his head, that would happen. And because it's a lower division guy, the narrative is no one cares about these guys. It's not a story, you know, beyond what the really loud people like the John Gunnings of the world write in English language media. But it's going to take more people being more brave. And I'll stop there and kind of kick it over to Andy.
All right, Andy, you've written an excellent piece about this, and you followed up on it. Let's hear it.
Well, and I guess one of the perspectives that I have is that I'm actually a safety regulator. Like, I work for the rail safety regulator for the United States. And it has me wondering, what are the regulations and what are the standards for the sports industry as a whole there in Japan, not just for sumo, but in combat sports over there, in other sports, because I doubt that if in the instant that injury seemed rather innocuous. He fell forward. It was not like some gruesome injury, but then when he lay there and he was moving, he was apparently like talking and communicative. But if that had happened, let's say during during judo or karate in the Olympics, what would have been the protocols?
Oh yeah.
And I am, um, I guess, surprised that there are not more procedures and more protocol, like those protocols in place, uh, because Japan definitely has what we call safety culture. Uh, from earthquake drills, I mean, everybody over there knows where to be, and they have drills for all kinds of safety events, like when you're talking about trains and
Oh yeah.
transportation, or uh, I mean, terrorism, anything like that. They've got that. But what we don't know are safety statistics around the sport. We don't know how often this happens, and so I am really interested in exploring that piece of it a bit more, to see what can be done, or really, I guess the ultimate goal here is we know that accidents happen, but what's important is that when they happen, the people who are there know what to do. I mean, just today, like I sliced my hand open at when I was doing my stained glass class, and when I'm bleeding all over the place, like Hokuto Fuji, it they knew exactly what to do. I mean, it didn't hurt. I mean, but like they knew where to go for the first aid kit. They had like the liquid bandage in there and all that kind of stuff. We're talking about a combat sport. There are people there around the dohyo who are staff who are trained in all kinds of um, intricacies of the culture, but the safety culture needs to be a part of that. And I'm not sure whether they need to like have external healthcare staff there, which they've got a clinic downstairs. But I'm wondering whether they would be able to just implement some sort of um, uh, safety training, like CPR, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
for Yobidashi or Gyoji, because it seemed not only was there this instance, but a few days earlier, Naruto Oyakata got hit in the head by some falling rikishi, and I mean I was actually watching that happen live. He got kicked in the face, right in the eye. He's lying there motionless while the Gyoji up there is looking the other way, did not see anything, was completely unaware because that's what he's supposed to do. Meanwhile, the action's all happening behind him, and the Shimpan next to him is just kind of bemused, I guess. And it just seems like they don't know what to do. And I guess that is what is the most damaging, is
Yeah.
when
Lack of
things
awareness.
like this that are absolutely not just predictable but expected to happen when it's a combat sport. I mean, Takayasu had his injury
Yep.
and
Year ago.
like sitting there like screaming out in pain, I think during the silent basho, and so
It was.
it was magnified. And Kizaki Yumi I think he was a very, very lucky person, because when he was fighting Ikioi, his neck injury seemed to be pretty serious, but fortunately for him, he was able to walk away. I saw Toma absolutely pancake a guy, and it was just like you feel not only for Hibikiryu, but you got to imagine his opponent has to potentially have PTSD, like in the rail industry, we have our critical incident stress plans. What kinds of plans can the Kyokai put into place so that they just don't look like
callous bastards?
it, yeah, I mean, or just like they don't know what they're doing. And I mean, they need to im- they need to have a plan, look like they have a plan. They're not going to stop injury in sports.
Yep.
Nobody's going to do that. And I guess the we get sidetracked on reforms a lot of times, like, oh well, if they just lowered the dohyo, or if they did
Yeah.
something like, I mean, maybe my suggestion of being able to get like Yobidashi trained, maybe that's a little bit too far, but
Well,
it's just
I'll
like,
tell you how the NFL handles this. So I'll confess that my brother is a neurosurgeon, and perhaps in some circles a famous one. And it seems that, the NFL doesn't want to have an entire staff of specialists. But the way they do it is this. So for several years for the San Francisco 49ers, he was the staff neurosurgeon. And so every time there was a home game, they would send him a ticket so that he was in the stadium and he would be present in case something bad happened and they needed a neurosurgeon to consult on what's going on. And this displayed itself, I think probably around 2015 or so, when I attended it. Chicago Bears versus San Francisco 49ers with him. And some guy took a brutal shot to the head. And my brother stood up and was looking. He goes, he moved. Never mind. Somebody else's problem. Why couldn't sumo do that? You've got Dr. Takasu who comes in. He's a freaking plastic surgeon. Fine. Great. Why can't you have an orthopedic? Why can't you have a neuro? Why can't you have half a dozen sumo fan doctors? They don't even have to be the best doctors in the world. Just get them in the venue so that if something like this happens, their job is to go up there and try to make sure what's going on. And we won't even get into whether or not they should be women. But yes.
And we need to just, I guess, make sure that they've got the equipment there, that the people who are there are trained in how to use it. I mean, that one clip of you've got Goedo and former Goedo, Takekuma, and a couple of the other Oyakata, like struggling with this stretcher. Is this the right side? I mean,
they had no clue.
We just train people, make sure that they know what's going to what to do, because we know that bad things are going to happen. People are going to break their limbs. I mean, it's a combat sport. It's going to happen. A fan is going to have a heart attack. Yep. Like these, what was it? A mayor during the Jungyo is going to have a stroke.
And there we go again.
And the thing is, I went back and I watched that video. Oh, right, because of the Al Jazeera thing, I rewatched that video, and I was actually struck by they did not care that the first nurse came up. The woman was on the dohyo, and they did not seem to care. It was just, she's taking care of him. They got a crew immediately there. It was when some more people started coming up that then one of the gyojis or attendants had said to get off of the stage, but like she was still there attending to him. And so I think that in situations like this, we definitely, I would not be surprised if a lot of the I guess tradition would melt away in these cases, and we wouldn't be so, I guess, absurdly stereotypical or whatever. But ultimately, what I would hope for is that they would just look like they know what they're doing and have a plan.
So, Josh, any final thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, I think the problem that we see also a lot, especially online within the sumo community, sumo fan community, is the like tinfoil hat brigade and all these guys, and they're like, oh, if you just lowered the dohyo or got rid of that or like put some padding around, like injuries would go away. And like to Andy's point, they're not going to go away. They're not going to decrease. There will always be injuries in sumo, but it's beyond that, not the same issue. And the Hibikiryu industry demonstrates this. This was an on-doyo injury. The problem with this, as much as it is with any of these injuries that come from people falling off the doyo, falling into an Oyakata, falling into a wealthy dentist, whatever it is that when anyone who's ever suffered an injury, especially a sports injury, I've suffered many, will tell you the first moments after an injury are crucial. How you set the injury, how you're able to receive and get to medical assistance. Yep. And as you mentioned, in sumo, you have a bunch of old guys standing around, sometimes not looking, not knowing what to do. You know, you look at that Hibikiryu injury, and without wanting to name names, you got a couple of Oyakata in the background. One's kind of like waving his hand, like, hey, maybe this guy needs some help. The other one's not doing anything at all. You got a Yobidashi standing there, just like sort of talking to him, being like, "Oh, are you okay? What's going on?" And like when someone's immobile and potentially suffering a life-threatening injury, or certainly a life-altering injury, that ain't what's required. And I think, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, we're in this era now where the Sumo Association's their own worst enemy, because when the reckoning does come from outside the organization, as it invariably will, these videos will be shown over and over and over. I mean, this isn't like the old days where, you know, video of sumo content was limited to some highlights of the top division or like 1 or 2 fights a day. People want content now going all the way down to the bottom divisions. You know, we're talking in another segment about Oyakata and their new recruits, and we want to see them and know what's going on in Jonidan and Sandanme. It's like these videos of a Sandanme Rikishi will be shown. Like, they're not going away, and it's clear that the organization makes no attempt to improve the condition of anybody who's seriously injured on doyo. And, you know, as I said before, there's cynical people who will say, well, they're not selling Hibikiryu keychains and fridge magnets and Nobori, and that's why they don't care. But they were selling Tomokaze and Takayasu keychains and fridge magnets. So I think it's a reflection that there's something deeply wrong in the organization, rather than a reflection of the historic attitude, rather than, you know, we need to reform the way that sumo works. It's just, to Andy's point, preparation, preparedness, teach people how to deal with injuries and issues, and you don't have to change the sport, but treat the people who work in the sport, you know, your employees, your rikishi, the people who make the sport what it is, with the respect they deserve, so that they can keep getting up there and deliver the product that people love.
So I'll close out this segment by saying we don't actually have a status update on his condition, except to know that the last word we had was that he was in the hospital and the situation was grave. And apologies for ending on a down note, but that's the end of this news segment. We hope that he makes a decent recovery, that he gets in contact with a good neurosurgeon, and that he gets the treatment he needs in order to regain as much quality of life as possible. And thank you very much for spending your time with Tachiai on this news update. We will be back with Banzuke discussion after it's released in a couple of weeks. And thank you very much for tuning in. Remember, for Sumo, it's Tachiai.